The Pacific Ocean was a restless sheet of steel blue when USS New Jersey BB-62 first cut through its waters in early 1944. Even from a distance, the ship did not look like anything else in the American fleet. Its hull was coated in deep navy blue Measure 21 camouflage, a color so dark it seemed to drink in the sunlight instead of reflecting it. To the Japanese who first glimpsed it on the horizon, the massive silhouette looked less like a ship and more like a creature rising from the depths. They gave it a name whispered through binoculars and radio intercepts: the Black Dragon. New Jersey was the pride of the Iowa-class battleships, the fastest and most heavily armed capital ships ever built by the United States. Where older American battleships pushed through the ocean at lumbering speeds, the Iowa-class flew across it. 33 knots, an astonishing pace for a vessel weighing more than 50,000 tons fully loaded. It meant New Jersey could sail with the fast carrier groups, keeping up with the Essex-class carriers as they raced across the Pacific. Speed alone did not define her. The ship carried 9 16-inch Mark 7 guns, each barrel capable of firing shells weighing more than a ton. The force of a single broadside could flatten a city block. Beneath the guns lay layers of armored plates arranged in a sloped citadel that angled incoming fire away from vital spaces. It was not simply thick steel. It was engineering designed to turn the ship into a floating fortress that could take hits other ships could not survive. Inside the Armored Command Center, Admiral Raymond Spruance took command of the Fifth Fleet with a calm presence that matched the quiet hum of machinery around him. This would be New Jersey's first major combat tour, and she would carry the commander of one of the most powerful fleets in naval history. Before the ship left Pearl Harbor, sailors walked her decks with the careful pride of men preparing a predator for its first hunt. They polished brass, checked cables, greased turret mechanisms, and calibrated the new Mark 8 radar system that could track enemy aircraft long before they appeared as specks in the sky. Damage control teams drilled constantly. They practiced sealing bulkheads, patching ruptures, fighting fires, and keeping the ship moving even if half the compartments flooded. They knew the Pacific was not merely an ocean, it was a gauntlet. To the crew, New Jersey felt alive. The ship vibrated with energy when the boilers roared. The decks trembled slightly when the turbines pushed her past 30 knots. Sailors said that when you placed your hand on the bulkhead during full-speed runs, you could feel a heartbeat. The first long voyage took her west, across thousands of miles of open water toward the looming battles of 1944. At night, the ship sailed under a black sky stitched with stars. The sea around her glowed faintly as waves broke against her bow. Lookouts scanned the horizon for enemy submarines. Radar operators monitored faint echoes that faded and reappeared. The Pacific looked peaceful, but every sailor aboard understood the truth. Somewhere ahead waited the Philippine Islands and the largest Japanese naval concentrations remaining in the region. New Jersey's role was clear: protect the carriers that would deliver the hammer blow of American air power, stand between them and any Japanese battleship, cruiser, or formation of aircraft that attempted to break through. The ship arrived in the combat zone north of New Guinea in early 1944 and immediately joined carrier task forces preparing to strike the Caroline Islands. As dawn broke on March mornings, the decks of the carriers lit up with aircraft lining for launch. Wildcat and Hellcat fighters roared into the sky, followed by Avengers and Helldivers. New Jersey maintained a steady protective arc around them, her radar sweeping the heavens for enemy planes. Then came the moment that convinced every sailor aboard that the ship was built for war at a scale they had only imagined. During fleet maneuvers practicing coordinated fire, the order came to conduct a full power run. All boilers lit, all turbines engaged. The ship surged forward with a force that surprised even the veterans. Spray exploded over the bow. The engines thundered below deck. New Jersey, the massive Black Dragon, was running faster than many cruisers. The sailors felt the hull rise slightly as she hit her stride. They looked at each other with a mix of disbelief and excitement. A battleship that could run like a predator, hunt like one, and strike with the force of an earthquake. They understood then why the Japanese had a name for her. As word spread across the fleet about New Jersey's speed, firepower, and resilience, she became something more than a warship. She became a symbol of American naval power at its peak. A ship designed not just to fight, but to survive anything the enemy could throw at her. No one yet knew how soon that resilience would be tested. Ahead lay the Philippine Sea, Leyte Gulf, and Luzon. Ahead lay Japanese shore batteries, torpedo bombers, and kamikaze attacks. Ahead lay the battles where New Jersey would take hits that should have crippled a battleship and keep firing as if nothing had happened. The Black Dragon had arrived, and the Pacific was about to learn what it meant for a ship to refuse to die.
The Philippine Sea was a furnace in late 1944. The air shimmered with heat rising from the water, and the horizon pulsed with the distant thunder of engines from the American fast carrier groups pushing west toward Luzon. USS New Jersey sailed at the center of it all, her dark hull carving a steady path through swells that gleamed like molten glass. She was the shield of the carriers, the moving fortress that stood between them and whatever the Japanese Empire still had left to throw. On the morning of one of her first major actions near Luzon, the sky was a stark blue dome without a single cloud. The calm made the crew uneasy. Calm seas in wartime often meant something was coming. Radar operators worked quietly behind glowing green screens, tracking faint echoes from land-based aircraft. Radio intercept teams picked up scattered transmissions crackling with tension. The Japanese shore batteries along Luzon were awake, and American pilots were already reporting tracer fire reaching for them as they crossed inland. New Jersey held her station at the edge of the carrier formation when the first shells came. They arrived as flashes far across the sea, bright sparks darting from hidden coastal emplacements. Moments later the sound reached the ship, a deep rolling thunder that echoed across the deck. Lookouts spotted the first incoming round by the thin white line it carved into the sky. Impact. A violent metallic crack slammed through the hull as a shell struck the forward superstructure at a sharp angle. The sound rolled through the ship like a hammer hitting a cathedral bell. Sailors staggered. Paint dust and rust flakes drifted down from overhead pipes. But nothing stopped. Damage control teams ran not with fear, but with instinct drilled into them through endless training. They checked compartments, inspected bulkheads, and passed word to the bridge. No flooding, no fire, no breach. The shell had failed to penetrate the sloped armor. The Black Dragon kept moving forward as calmly as if it had been tapped by a stone. Another shell screamed overhead and struck near Turret 1. The explosion sent fragments ricocheting along the deck. Shrapnel pelted the fixed steel of the turret face, leaving bright silver scars. Yet the turret crew reported their systems intact. Elevation gears ready. Fire control ready. Breach mechanisms ready. The Japanese officers manning the guns on Luzon had expected to frighten the American battleships. Instead, they watched through binoculars as New Jersey continued to close in, undeterred, her forward turrets rotating with slow, implacable intent. Then came the moment written in every after-action report from that day. A full salvo from a concealed battery found its mark not once, but twice, striking the armored belt just above the waterline. The shock rattled machinery from bow to stern. Men in the engine rooms felt the deck tremble beneath their boots. The heat from the impact radiated through the metal, leaving scorch marks along the hull. Still, the ship did not slow. Inside the armored conning tower, Admiral Halsey steadied himself on a railing and looked toward the bridge crew. The information coming in was simple and repeated over and over. All systems operational, all guns ready, all compartments sealed. New Jersey pressed forward. Then, as if determined to test the ship further, a Japanese torpedo bomber managed to break through a screen of fighters. The aircraft dropped low over the water, engine coughing smoke, and released a long silver torpedo that sliced toward the battleship with frightening speed. The helmsman reacted instantly. Full rudder. The entire ship leaned into a turn so sharp that sailors on the weather deck had to grab railings to keep from sliding. The torpedo passed so close to the bow that its wake splashed across the forward hull plates. Had it struck, The story of New Jersey might have ended differently. But the Black Dragon refused to give the sea that chance. Within seconds, the ship stabilized and returned to formation, her guns already trained toward the coastline. Fire control officers relayed coordinates calculated from spotting aircraft circling above. The first 16-inch shells thundered from the main battery with a force that shook the ocean itself. The recoil sent shockwaves through the hull as the enormous shells arced toward Luzon. When they landed, the earth on the coastline erupted into towering clouds of dust and smoke. The Japanese batteries that had dared to engage New Jersey disappeared in plumes of fire. Yet even as shore guns fell silent, the crew continued to count the impacts they had taken. Damage control teams spread across the ship. They found dents the size of shields. They found scoured paint, crushed railings, blown-out ventilation covers, and scorch marks along the armored belt. But nowhere did they find a single breach of the citadel. The officers who later examined the hull wrote the same conclusion. New Jersey had taken direct hits from heavy-caliber guns and suffered nothing more than cosmetic wounds. Somewhere on Luzon, a Japanese officer recorded his own account of the exchange. The dark battleship was struck again and again, but she did not stop. She did not turn. She did not even hesitate. By the time the action ended, New Jersey had proven herself in a manner no trial, no drill, and no sea trial could ever match. She had been tested by real fire from real guns aimed to kill her, and she had absorbed the blows with the cold indifference of steel designed specifically for moments like these. The sailors whispered about it that night as they scrubbed the deck and patched superficial damage. It was as if the ship had shrugged off the hits, as if she had taken the punishment deliberately. They realized something new about their battleship. New Jersey was not simply strong, she was something closer to unstoppable. The Black Dragon had taken its first real wounds, and it had answered them with fire. The days after the first Luzon engagement settled into a tense rhythm as USS New Jersey continued her relentless advance across the Philippine archipelago. Word spread quickly through the fleet about the dark battleship that had taken multiple direct hits and showed no sign of slowing. Some sailors joked that the Black Dragon must have had iron bones. Others whispered with a mix of awe and superstition that she was a ship touched by something beyond steel and engineering. But the truth was simpler and far more remarkable. New Jersey was built not only to fight, but to survive everything the Pacific could hurl at her. The real test came during the series of operations that followed as she escorted carriers through the thickest Japanese defenses around Luzon and Formosa. Each day, the ship steamed forward, her radar sweeping for enemy aircraft and her lookouts scanning the horizon for threats that could materialize from any direction. Japan's airfields were still active in this region. Kamikaze attacks had begun to increase in number. Shore batteries were firing from hidden positions. At times, the Japanese seemed determined to break the will of the American fleet with sheer persistence. But New Jersey met each threat with the same implacable strength. One morning, the carriers launched long-range strikes against Formosa. The sea was calm and the bright sun made visibility near perfect. But perfect visibility works both ways. Japanese observers on the coast spotted the American formation and relayed coordinates to bomber groups. Moments later, a swarm of enemy aircraft rose into the sky, heading toward the carriers like a dark smudge spreading across the horizon. New Jersey reacted instantly. Anti-aircraft crews rushed into position, the 5-inch guns elevated. Bofors and Oerlikons spun into action. The sky filled with black bursts as the battleship's heavy guns opened fire. Tracers stitched upward in deadly arcs. A bomber on the left flank caught a burst and spiraled into the sea, trailing smoke. Another attempted a low run toward the carrier Franklin, only to be shredded by 40mm fire from New Jersey's starboard batteries. But even as the battleship laid down a protective wall of fire, one lone aircraft slipped through the chaos. A damaged bomber diving erratically, its pilot attempting a final suicide strike. It roared toward New Jersey from high on the port bow. The gunners fired until their barrels glowed, but the aircraft kept coming, trailing smoke, wobbling, but still aimed like a spear. It exploded just above the forward deck. Shrapnel rained down on the ship.
Steel fragments sliced across the superstructure, ripping open ventilation ducts, smashing railing stanchions, and sending sparks across the deck. Some fragments embedded themselves in the side of turret 2, leaving jagged scars that looked like claw marks. The shockwave rattled electronics, the blast wave momentarily stunned several sailors. But when the smoke cleared, the Black Dragon stood unshaken. Damage control teams were already running forward. They sealed vents, extinguished small fires, patched ruptured lines, and cleared debris. The ship never slowed. Not a single gun stopped firing. Not a single system went offline. In the after-action report, an officer described the scene. The explosion hit us hard, but the ship kept breathing. It was like she shook herself once and kept going. More attacks came. Japanese shore batteries hidden behind cliffs fired sporadic salvos. Several shells struck near turret 1, denting armor plate and sending showers of red-hot metal across the deck. A fragment pierced the outer skin near frame 70, but the internal armored citadel held firm. Another round hit the aft superstructure and cracked open a ventilation trunk, but the internal systems continued unaffected. Through it all, New Jersey advanced. Her designers had given her an armored belt so thick and angled that incoming shells often skidded off rather than penetrate. Beneath the deck, watertight compartments created a layered defense that prevented flooding from spreading. Redundant pumps, generators, and fire suppression systems allowed the ship to fight even if entire sections were damaged. But the true reason she refused to die was the crew. Battle-hardened and relentlessly trained, the damage control teams aboard New Jersey were among the best in the Navy. Every time the ship took a hit, they moved with practiced coordination. Steel patches appeared on ruptured bulkheads within minutes. Fires that could devastate lesser ships were extinguished almost before they had time to grow. A section officer once remarked that damage control aboard New Jersey was like a second set of lungs. If the ship was wounded, she healed herself through the hands of her crew. The Japanese noticed. Reports intercepted after the war revealed their astonishment. One officer wrote, "We saw our shells strike the dark battleship. Sparks leapt from her sides, smoke rose, but she did not turn, she did not leave the formation, she did not stop firing." That disbelief grew each time New Jersey came into range. The ship seemed immune not only to their guns, but to their expectations of how a battleship should behave under fire. As 1945 approached, the crew of New Jersey had begun to see their ship more than steel and machinery. They had seen her take punishment that would cripple other vessels. They had seen her shrug off impacts that should have torn through her hull. They had seen her fight through explosions, near misses, and relentless bombardment. And repeatedly she had returned to port not for repairs, but only to reload ammunition. Sailors whispered the same words in every compartment, from the boiler rooms to the bridge. She refuses to die. The Black Dragon had earned her name. The Pacific threw its worst at her, and still she pressed forward, each blow only reinforcing her legend. The Japanese officers who watched her advance after taking hit after it were not simply witnessing a battleship. They were witnessing the arrival of a machine that defied destruction. And New Jersey was far from finished. Ahead lay the final battles of the Pacific. Ahead lay the roar of the 16-inch guns. Ahead lay the proof of what it meant for a ship to be truly unstoppable. When USS New Jersey sailed into the heart of the Philippine campaign, every man aboard already understood the ship's resilience, but now they would witness something even greater. Not her ability to endure fire, but her ability to unleash it. The Pacific had seen battleships fire before, but nothing prepared the fleet or the enemy for the sustained fury of New Jersey's 16-inch guns when she moved into full combat operations. Her mission shifted from pure protection of the carriers to direct bombardment of Japanese positions across Luzon, Formosa, and later the approaches to Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Each time she received the order to commence fire, a quiet tension settled across the decks. Sailors paused in their work, officers tightened their grips on railings, Marines near the superstructure braced their knees instinctively. Everyone who had ever heard a 16-inch broadside knew what was coming. In the bowels of the ship, the magazines came alive. Crews pushed massive shells weighing between 1,900 and 2,700 pounds along steel rails. Powder bags were lifted from racks in a choreography drilled to perfection. The loaders worked shirtless despite the cool air, their muscles shining with sweat as they manhandled shells taller than a man's torso. Above them, The 3 giant turrets rotated with hydraulic power, each one a fortress unto itself. Turret 1 at the bow, turret 2 just behind it, turret 3 near the stern. Inside each turret, nearly 100 men operated in cramped, armored spaces, communicating with shouts and hand signals over the constant vibration of the ship. When fire control gave the signal, the gunnery captains called out the final checks. Breech locked, powder set, shell seated, elevation ready. The gunnery officer's voice came through the system, calm, steady, and almost ceremonial. Stand by, fire. The deck heaved. The ship shook from bow to stern. 3 pillars of fire erupted from the barrels, blinding in their intensity. A wall of orange flame rolled outward like a wave of sunlight. The concussion was so strong that sailors felt it punch the air from their lungs even deep inside the armored citadel. Men topside swore they could feel their bones rattle. The 16-inch shells climbed into the sky with a slow, majestic arc before plunging toward Japanese positions miles away. Each impact erupted in columns of earth, concrete, and fire that dwarfed nearby buildings. Shorelines shook, hillsides collapsed, entire bunkers disappeared beneath clouds of smoke and debris. During the bombardments of Luzon, pilots flying overhead reported seeing explosions so large that they resembled volcanic eruptions. One aviator wrote that it looked like the earth itself was tearing open. But what astonished the Japanese most was not the power of a single broadside. It was the relentlessness. New Jersey could fire again and again, faster than many armies could reload field artillery. Her gunners kept up a rhythm that seemed impossible for such massive guns. Every few minutes, another broadside, every shell landing with devastating precision thanks to radar plotting systems that guided the guns through haze, smoke, and rain. On the western coast of Luzon, a Japanese coastal commander recorded that the black battleship fired with such speed that the air trembled continuously. He described fires breaking out across defensive positions before his men could return fire. Several batteries attempted to strike back, but New Jersey simply pulled further offshore, adjusted her angle, and resumed her bombardment with even greater accuracy. At Formosa, she fired so many rounds that nearby cruisers struggled to keep count. Sailors joked that the Pacific itself must be trembling beneath her. Then came Iwo Jima. In the weeks leading up to the invasion, New Jersey joined other battleships in preparing the island for assault, but her firepower became legendary among the Marines who watched from transport ships. They saw the Black Dragon's guns flash again and again, pounding the volcanic slopes of Suribachi and carving deep wounds into the rock. One Marine later wrote that watching New Jersey fire felt like watching a god of war clearing a battlefield. Okinawa pushed the ship even further. Japanese positions were dug deep, hidden among caves and reinforced bunkers. Destroyers and cruisers struggled to achieve the same effect. But when New Jersey joined the bombardment line, entire cliffs collapsed under repeated 16-inch strikes. Engine rooms reported the same message each time the barrage began. Turbines steady. Boilers steady, all systems ready. The massive recoil, enough to shove thousands of tons of steel sideways in the water, never damaged machinery. The electrical systems continued without interruption. The ammunition hoists ran smoothly. New Jersey fired more than 5,800 shells during the war, a staggering number for guns of that size. Other battleships suffered mechanical breakdowns, cracked barrels, and electrical failures under such intense usage. But the Black Dragon kept firing, day after day, island after island. Even Japanese officers who witnessed the bombardments could not believe it. They wrote reports describing a ship that seemed immune to exhaustion, a ship whose guns roared with the fury of an army, a ship that could take hits from bombs and shore batteries, yet continue firing without pause. For the crews, the roar of the main battery became something like a heartbeat, a rhythm that marked each stage of the campaign. The sound echoed through their dreams. They felt it in their bones long after the guns cooled. By the time New Jersey finished her Pacific operations, her barrels bore the faint lines of heat wear and her decks carried the scars of countless battles. But the machinery inside those armored walls remained intact. The gunners remained ready, the ship remained unbroken. And the legend continued to grow. The Black Dragon had not only survived the war's fiercest bombardments, it had delivered fury on a scale few ships in history had ever matched.
By the time the Pacific War approached its final year, USS New Jersey had already carved her name into the ocean with fire and steel. The sailors who served aboard her walked the decks with a quiet pride that came not from arrogance, but from the knowledge that they were part of something extraordinary. They had seen their ship take direct hits from shore batteries, survive near misses from torpedoes, withstand bomb fragments and kamikaze blasts, and fire more rounds than any battleship in her class. And through it all, the Black Dragon had never once been forced to withdraw from battle. Not for repairs, not for rest, not for anything. Her resilience became a story whispered across the fleet. Crews on destroyers spoke of her as if she were alive. Pilots returning from missions said they could see her black silhouette on the horizon like a guardian watching over the carriers. New recruits approached her gangway with awe as though stepping aboard a living legend. Even the enemy had stopped referring to her by her whole number. To Japanese officers, she was simply the dark battleship that refused to die. As the war expanded toward Okinawa and the Japanese home islands, New Jersey's reputation only deepened. She escorted carriers into the heart of the storm, launching strikes that crippled enemy airfields and factories. She provided anti-aircraft fire that saved countless ships from kamikaze attacks. When needed, she moved to the front and unleashed her guns, pounding enemy strongholds into dust. She seemed tireless. Below deck, the engineers and machinists tended to the boilers like priests tending a sacred flame. The turbines never faltered. The pumps ran smoothly. Even after months without a major overhaul, the engines responded like they were fresh from the shipyard. The hull's armored belt, scarred but intact, embraced the machinery like ribs protecting a beating heart. Damage control teams spent nights patching dents, welding plates, clearing debris from shattered fittings, and sealing minor breaches, but they were always cleaning and repairing minor wounds. Never catastrophic ones. Never anything that stopped the ship from rejoining the formation the next morning. During one particularly intense phase of the Okinawa campaign, New Jersey remained on station for weeks without relief, guarding the fast carriers as waves of kamikaze aircraft hurled themselves toward the fleet. The dark battleship's guns became a constant presence in the sky. Her 5-inch batteries fired so consistently that gunners learned to work in rotating shifts without waiting for orders. The flow of ammunition never stopped. Sailors remembered nights when the sea around her glowed with spent casings and tracer fire, the sky lit with explosions of aircraft attempting to breach the American defenses. Through it all, she fired, and fired, and fired, her silhouette illuminated repeatedly by the flashes of her own guns. And still she remained untouched in any vital way. Not even the kamikaze that struck near her forward deck had slowed her for more than minutes. Not even the torpedo that nearly caught her bow had stopped her. Not even the dozens of shells fired from Luzon's coastal batteries had penetrated her armored citadel. As 1945 drew to a close and the Japanese Empire collapsed, New Jersey continued sailing at the heart of the American fleet, a symbol of something the Pacific had never seen before, an unstoppable battleship that combined firepower, speed, and survivability in a single black-hulled silhouette. When the guns finally fell silent and sailors looked toward home, New Jersey steamed into port not as a battered relic, but as a proven machine of war. Her hull bore the scratches and scars of dozens of engagements, each a reminder of the chaos she had survived. But structurally, she was as sound as the day she left the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Technicians who inspected her systems after months of constant battle were stunned at her condition. She did not retire. Instead, she prepared for her next war. But even before Korea, even before Vietnam, even before Lebanon, and even the Gulf War, her legend was already sealed. The men who fought in the Pacific remembered her as the guardian of the fast carriers. Marines remembered her as the thunder that shook the shores of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Pilots remembered the way she stood unbroken below them on every sortie. and the enemy officers who faced her never forgot the sight of the dark battleship that kept firing no matter how many times they struck her. In the final pages of war diaries captured after Japan's surrender, one officer wrote of the ship he saw from a shattered observation post on Luzon. "The black battleship took our fire. She burned in places, but she did not slow. She did not turn. She did not stop her guns. She was a dragon made of iron." Years later, when historians tried to explain her survival, they pointed to her sloped armor, her brilliant engineering, her advanced damage control systems, and her disciplined crew. But sailors who had served aboard her gave a different answer. They simply said that the Black Dragon wanted to fight, and so she did.